The price of inheritance. Part 1. The wolves at the door. My mother always told me that family ties can be the strongest bonds or the heaviest chains. I never understood what she meant until I became Rachel Winters, widow at 32, single mother to 5-year-old Olivia, and public enemy number 1 to the prestigious Lambert family of Boston. 3 months after burying my husband, Michael Lambert, I sat across from his parents in their Beacon Hill mansion, the same home where Michael had grown up surrounded by old money and even older expectations. Eleanor Lambert, with her perfect silver bob and pearl necklace that probably cost more than my car, hadn't touched her tea. Harold Lambert, former federal judge and patriarch of the family, studied me like I was a defendant in his courtroom. "Rachel," Eleanor said, breaking the suffocating silence, "we've been patient, but it's time to discuss Olivia's future." I clutched my mug tighter. Olivia's future is with me, her mother. Harold cleared his throat. Michael would have wanted his daughter to have certain advantages, the kind that come with the Lambert name and upbringing. Translation: the kind that come with Lambert money and Lambert control. The kind I could never provide on a high school art teacher's salary. Michael and I discussed how we wanted to raise our daughter, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He was very clear about wanting Olivia to have a normal childhood. Eleanor's perfectly lined lips twitched. Normal? Is that what you call living in that tiny apartment in Somerville? Michael graduated from Harvard. His grandfather was a senator. Lamberts don't live in starter homes. I bit my tongue to avoid reminding her that Michael had deliberately chosen a life different from his parents. He'd become an environmental lawyer instead of joining his father's corporate firm. He'd fallen in love with me, a public school teacher with student loans and no pedigree. He'd been the black sheep, and they'd never forgiven him, or me. Michael left everything to Olivia and me, I reminded them, including his decisions about her upbringing. Harold's face hardened. The will can be contested. Michael wasn't thinking clearly in those final years. Ever since he met you, the implication hung in the air. I had somehow corrupted their perfect son, led him astray from his destiny. The fact that Michael had rebelled against their controlling ways long before meeting me was conveniently forgotten. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, setting down my mug before I could throw it. "Not at all," Eleanor said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're simply concerned about our granddaughter, about her well-being." As I drove home that evening, their words echoed in my mind. I knew the Lamberts well enough to recognize a declaration of war when I heard one. What I didn't know yet was how far they would go. I picked up Olivia from my best friend Jade's apartment. Olivia ran to me, her dark curls bouncing, curls that matched Michael's in every way. "Mommy." Aunt Jade let me paint with her special brushes. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "That's wonderful, sweetie." Jade, reading my expression, mouthed, "That bad?" I nodded. Jade had been my rock since Michael's accident 6 months ago. She knew the Lamberts and their tactics all too well. Back at our apartment, modest but filled with love, art, and memories, I tucked Olivia into bed. She clutched the photo of Michael that she kept beside her pillow. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming back from heaven?" she asked, her question piercing my heart as it did each time. "Honey, remember what we talked about? Daddy can't come back, but he's watching over us. He loves you so much." Grandma Eleanor said I could go live with them and have a pony, Olivia mumbled sleepily. She said their house has a special room just for me. My blood froze. They'd already been talking to her behind my back. After Olivia fell asleep, I sat at our kitchen table, staring at Michael's life insurance papers and the deed to our apartment. Modest by Lambert standards, but it was ours. Michael had insisted on buying it outright, rejecting his parents' offers of help that always came with strings attached. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should check Olivia's school records tomorrow. There seems to be some confusion about who's authorized to pick her up." I called the school immediately, and sure enough, Eleanor Lambert had listed herself as an approved guardian, claiming it was at my request. The first move in their game. Later that night, I pulled out a leather-bound journal from the shelf, Michael's journal. He'd documented everything about his parents over the years, their manipulation tactics, their business connections, their secrets. Michael had kept it as insurance, he'd said, against the day they might try to control him again. I never thought I'd need this, I whispered to his picture on our bedside table. But they're coming for our daughter, Michael. And I won't let them win. As I flipped through the pages, a plan began to form. The Lamberts had money, connections, and power. But I had something they didn't, the truth. And I knew how to use it. The wolves were at my door. But they'd soon learn that even cornered mothers can bite back. Part 2. The Gathering Storm. The first attack came through Olivia's school. I'd corrected the pickup authorization, but a week later, I received a call from Principal Dawson asking me to come in for a meeting. When I arrived, Eleanor Lambert was already seated in his office, wearing concern like an expensive perfume. Mrs. Winters, Principal Dawson began, looking uncomfortable. We've received some concerns about Olivia's home situation. I glanced at Eleanor, whose face remained impassive. What concerns exactly? He shuffled papers. There have been reports that Olivia comes to school tired, sometimes unwashed. That she mentions being alone while you work late hours. My jaw dropped. That's completely untrue. I'm home every evening by 5. Olivia is never alone. Perhaps not intentionally, Eleanor interjected smoothly. But single parenting is so difficult, especially with your financial constraints. No one is blaming you, Rachel. We're offering help. The "we" wasn't lost on me. Nor was the fact that Eleanor had somehow convinced the principal of a respected Cambridge private school, where Michael and I had specifically enrolled Olivia to give her a good education without the elitism of the Lamberts' preferred institutions, to entertain these baseless accusations. After the meeting, I cornered Eleanor in the parking lot. I know what you're doing. She adjusted her Hermes scarf. I'm looking out for my granddaughter's best interests. Something you seem incapable of doing. By lying about me? By trying to make me look unfit? Oh, Rachel. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. If you were truly fit, there would be nothing to question, would there? A proper mother would want her child to have every advantage. I stepped closer. A proper grandmother wouldn't try to steal a child from her mother. Eleanor's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the steel beneath. Michael was manipulated by you until his dying day. I won't let you do the same to Olivia. The Lambert legacy will continue properly. That night, I called Derek, Michael's college roommate who had become a family lawyer in downtown Boston. I'd avoided legal action, hoping to spare Olivia the trauma, but it was clear the Lamberts weren't playing fair. They're building a case for custodial interference, Derek explained after I filled him in. They'll claim you're unfit, that Michael would have wanted them involved. Given Harold's connections in the judicial system, they might find a sympathetic judge. But that's ridiculous. I'm a good mother. I have a stable job, a home. Rachel, Derek interrupted gently, in cases like this, perception matters as much as reality. They're creating a narrative. You need to counter it. The next day, I received notice that Harold Lambert had filed for grandparental visitation rights, the first legal step toward greater control. The hearing was set for 3 weeks away. That same afternoon, I discovered someone had been in our apartment. Nothing was missing, but things were slightly out of place. Michael's framed law degree was askew. Olivia's medication for her mild asthma had been moved from its usual spot. When I picked up Olivia from school, her teacher pulled me aside. Mrs. Winters, Olivia mentioned that a nice lady came to observe the class today, her grandmother? We didn't have that on our visitor log. My heart raced. When was this? Just after lunch. Is everything okay? Eleanor had gone to Olivia's school without permission. Again. That evening, as Olivia played in her room, I called Jade in tears. They're everywhere. Watching me, collecting evidence. How do I fight people who can buy their way into any building, any office? You don't fight money with money, Jade replied. You fight it with brains. And honey, you're the smartest person I know. After hanging up, I returned to Michael's journal with new purpose. I wasn't just looking for information anymore. I was looking for leverage. 3 entries caught my attention. April 15th, 2017. Dad suggested I help cover up environmental violations for Winchester Development. When I refused, he implied my position at the firm would be reconsidered. Typical Harold tactics, family loyalty above all, even the law he claims to revere. June 8th, 2017. Mom's charade as philanthropist continues. Diverted $250,000 from the Lambert Foundation to renovate their Nantucket house. Board members either complicit or clueless. September 23rd, 2017. The Carlisle case settlement included a confidentiality agreement about Harold's interference with evidence. If this ever came to light, I remembered the Carlisle case vaguely, a major environmental lawsuit against one of Harold's clients that had settled mysteriously after looking like a sure win for the plaintiffs. Michael had been troubled by it, but wouldn't discuss details. The next morning, I called Tom Perez, Michael's colleague from his environmental law firm. Tom, it's Rachel Winters. I need to ask you about the Carlisle case. A pause. Rachel, that case is under strict confidentiality. I know, but Michael left notes, and I think Harold Lambert may have interfered with evidence. Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. We can't talk about this on the phone. Meet me at the Adams Cafe in an hour. Over coffee in a back booth, Tom confirmed my suspicions. Michael was devastated. His father pressured a lab technician to alter test results that showed dangerous levels of chemicals in the groundwater. When Michael threatened to come forward, Harold reminded him that whistleblowers rarely prosper, especially ones with young families to support. And Michael backed down? Tom shook his head. Not exactly. He documented everything but agreed to stay quiet if Harold resigned from the board of the State Judicial Ethics Committee. It was Michael's way of ensuring Harold couldn't hurt anyone else through that particular avenue of power. I thought about this. So, Michael had evidence? Actual documentation. He said he kept it somewhere safe. I assumed it was with his other important papers. I hadn't found anything like that in our apartment. But then I remembered, Michael had a safe deposit box at Cambridge Savings Bank. I'd never needed to access it before. The next day, I visited the bank with our marriage certificate and Michael's death certificate. Inside the safe deposit box were several sealed envelopes, each labeled with names I recognized from Michael's journal. Carlisle, Lambert Foundation, Winchester Development. There was also a letter addressed to me. Dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, either I've shared this location with you, or something has happened to me. I pray it's the former, but I've learned to prepare for all contingencies. Growing up a Lambert teaches you that much. These documents contain information that could damage my parents considerably. I never wanted to use them. I only wanted them to respect my choices, my life with you and Olivia. But knowing my parents, I fear they may not respect my wishes even in death. If they ever try to interfere with your life or take Olivia from you, these papers will give you protection. Use them wisely, but don't hesitate if necessary. Some people only understand leverage. I love you both more than anything in this world. Michael. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Even from beyond the grave, Michael was protecting us. He'd known his parents might try something like this. Armed with these documents, I began preparing my counterattack. The Lamberts thought they were dealing with a helpless art teacher grieving her husband. They were about to discover they were dealing with a mother protecting her child, a mother with the ammunition Michael had left her. I made copies of everything and stored the originals in a new location. Then I reached out to several people mentioned in the documents, former colleagues of Harold's, board members of the Lambert Foundation, the lead plaintiff from the Carlisle case. By the end of the week, I had a clearer picture of just how vulnerable the mighty Lamberts actually were. Their perfect reputation, their most prized possession, was built on a foundation of manipulation, ethical violations, and in some cases, outright illegality. As the hearing for visitation rights approached, another incident occurred. I picked up Olivia from her ballet class to find her crying. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked, kneeling beside her. "Grandma Eleanor said you're sick in the head," she sobbed. She said that's why you won't let me live with them in the big house. Are you sick, Mommy? Fury rose in me like a tidal wave. Eleanor had cornered my 5-year-old at ballet class to poison her against me. That night, after Olivia was asleep, I made a decision. I'd been playing defense, responding to their attacks. It was time to seize the initiative. I texted Eleanor. *, we need to talk. Privately. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the public garden by the duck statues. *. Her reply came quickly. I'll have my assistant check my schedule. I responded. *, check the Carlisle files instead. And the Lambert Foundation audit records. *. No further messages came that night, but I knew she'd be there. The storm I'd been weathering was about to change direction. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Part 3. The Queen's Gambit. The public garden was busy with tourists and locals enjoying the spring afternoon. I arrived early and chose a bench with a clear view of the duck statues, but partially obscured by a flowering dogwood tree. Strategic positioning, something I'd learned from years of arranging rowdy teenagers in my art classroom. Eleanor arrived precisely at 2, looking immaculate in a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She scanned the area with narrowed eyes until she spotted me, then approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling every room she entered. This cloak and dagger routine is unnecessary, Rachel, she said as she sat beside me, leaving as much space between us as the bench allowed. If you have concerns, our lawyers can. I'm not talking to your lawyers, I interrupted. This is between us. She sighed with practiced patience. Very well. What was so urgent? I opened my bag and removed a manila envelope. Before we start, I want to be clear about something. I never wanted to be your enemy. All I've ever wanted was to raise my daughter, Michael's daughter, in peace. If that were true, you wouldn't be fighting us on visitation. Visitation is just your foot in the door. We both know where this is heading, a custody battle. Eleanor didn't deny it. Olivia is a Lambert. She deserves to be with her mother. I finished firmly. Michael wanted that too. He predicted you might try something like this. I handed her the envelope. She opened it warily and began scanning the first document inside, Michael's detailed account of the Carlisle case, complete with copied emails between Harold and the lab technician. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Where did you get this? Michael left it for me. Protection, he called it. I leaned closer. There's more. The Lambert Foundation's creative accounting. Harold's interference in his former clerk's judicial appointment. Even that incident with your nephew James at the Woodbridge prep school that the family paid to have expunged. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she returned the papers to the envelope. What exactly do you want? I want you to drop the visitation petition. I want you to stop spreading lies about me at Olivia's school. I want you to respect that I am her mother, and Michael chose me to raise her. She studied me with new eyes, calculating, reassessing. And if we don't, then copies of those documents go to the Massachusetts Bar Association Ethics Committee, the IRS, the Boston Globe, and several other interested parties. The Lambert name won't seem so prestigious when it's plastered across headlines about corruption and fraud. You destroy our family's reputation? After everything you've what? I challenged. Given us? All you've ever given me is contempt. All you've tried to give Olivia is confusion about where she belongs. Eleanor's jaw tightened. This is blackmail. This is protection, I corrected. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything except to be left alone to raise my daughter as her father and I planned. Harold won't stand for this. Harold has the most to lose if these documents become public. His judicial pension, his law license, his legacy. A jogger passed by, momentarily interrupting our showdown. When we were alone again, Eleanor spoke with cold precision. You think you've won, but you're playing a game you don't understand. The Lamberts have weathered worse storms than you. I stood up. Maybe. But are you willing to test that theory? Because I'm not bluffing, Eleanor. I have nothing to lose and everything to protect. As I walked away, Eleanor called after me. Michael would be ashamed of your tactics. I turned back. Actually, Michael prepared these files himself. He knew exactly who you were and what you were capable of. And he loved his daughter enough to make sure you couldn't take her from me. That evening, I received a call from Derek. Rachel, the Lamberts' lawyer, just filed to withdraw the visitation petition. Did something happen? Let's just say we came to an understanding, I replied, watching Olivia build a fort out of sofa cushions. 2 days later, however, I discovered that understanding might have been premature. Jade called me in a panic. Rachel, there's something you need to see. She sent me a link to a local community Facebook page. Someone had posted photos of me leaving Tom Perez's apartment building late at night, with a suggestive caption implying I was having an affair with my late husband's colleague. The post was anonymous, but the timing was no coincidence. I had met with Tom to return some of Michael's files, and we talked late into the night about Michael and the case we were building against the Lamberts. By afternoon, the school principal had called me in again. This time, the concern was about my moral character. Someone had sent the photos directly to the school board. Mrs. Winters, your personal life is your business, Principal Dawson said uncomfortably, but when it affects the school's reputation. Those photos are being completely misrepresented, I explained. Tom was Michael's colleague. We were discussing legal matters related to my in-laws' attempts to take Olivia. He looked skeptical. Several parents have already called, concerned about having their children in the class of someone exhibiting questionable judgment. I left the school seething. The Lamberts had changed tactics. If they couldn't win through legal channels, they destroy my reputation and possibly my career. A single mother with no job and a questionable moral character would have a much harder time retaining custody. That night, I called the one person who might understand what I was facing. Patricia Lambert, Harold's sister, had been estranged from the family for decades after refusing to go along with their manipulations. Michael had maintained contact with his aunt despite his parents' disapproval. Patricia, it's Rachel Winters, Michael's wife. Rachel. Oh my dear, I've been meaning to call. How are you and little Olivia holding up? After explaining the situation, I asked, did they do this to you too? Try to destroy you when you wouldn't fall in line? Patricia's laugh was bitter. Harold tried to have me committed when I threatened to reveal his affair with my best friend. Eleanor spread rumors that I had a drug problem when I refused to use my husband's political connections to help their causes. They don't fight fair, dear. How did you survive it? I left Boston. Started over somewhere they had less influence. But you can't do that with Olivia's connection to them. I thought for a moment. No, but maybe I can beat them at their own game. Patricia, would you be willing to make a statement about the Lamberts' tactics? Not about the legal issues in Michael's files, just about how they operate when crossed. Honey, I've been waiting 30 years for someone to ask. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. First, I called a former student who now worked at a local news blog. Zoe, remember how you said you wanted to write more serious investigative pieces? I have a story for you. Next, I contacted every parent from Olivia's class, explaining the situation directly and inviting them to a coffee meeting to address any concerns. Most were supportive once they heard the full context. Several had their own stories about the Lamberts' influence in Cambridge social circles. Then I visited Tom Perez again, this time at his office in broad daylight, with Jade as a witness. We drafted a cease and desist letter addressing the defamatory implications of the circulated photos. We sent copies to the community Facebook page administrators and to the email address that had sent the photos to the school board. Finally, I reached out to Diane Crawford, the current chair of the Lambert Foundation Board, whom Michael's notes identified as privately disturbed by some of the financial irregularities, but too intimidated to act. Mrs. Crawford, I believe we have mutual concerns about the governance of the Lambert Foundation. I began when she cautiously agreed to meet me for coffee. The pieces of my counterattack were falling into place. The Lamberts had tried to isolate me, to make me seem unstable and immoral. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I was a teacher. I built communities. I knew how to rally support and change narratives. By week's end, Zoe's article was published. Power, Privilege, and Family Courts, When Wealth Weaponizes Grief. Without directly accusing the Lamberts, It detailed how affluent families sometimes use their resources to separate children from loving, but less wealthy parents. Patricia Lambert was quoted extensively about the family's historical tactics. The article went semi-viral in local circles. Other news outlets picked it up. Suddenly, people were watching the Lamberts and, by extension, any moves they made against me. The school board issued a statement supporting me and apologizing for giving credence to unsubstantiated rumors. 3 Lambert Foundation board members privately contacted me, concerned about the issues Diane Crawford had brought to their attention following our meeting. The morning after Zoe's article was published, I received a text from Eleanor Lambert. Asterisk, this ends now. Come to the house. 3 p.m. today. Asterisk. I replied. Asterisk, I'll be there. But I won't be coming alone. Asterisk. The final confrontation was approaching. But this time, I wouldn't be walking into the lion's den unprepared. The Queen's gambit was set. I had sacrificed my privacy, opened my life to scrutiny, but positioned myself to win the endgame. As I dressed for the meeting, Olivia watched me with curious eyes. Are you going to see Grandma and Grandpa Lambert? Yes, sweetie. Are they still mad at you? I knelt to her level. They're not really mad at me, Olivia. They just miss your daddy very much, and sometimes that makes people do silly things. She nodded sagely, like when I was so sad I cut up my favorite dress. I smiled, remembering the incident shortly after Michael's funeral. Something like that. But we're going to figure it out, okay? I hugged her tightly, drawing strength from her warmth. Whatever happened at the Lamberts today, it would be for her, for our right to live and grieve and grow together, without interference. Part 4. Checkmate and New Beginnings. As I added touches of golden light to the canvas, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From enemies to reluctant allies, from suspicion to something approaching trust, the transformation seemed as unlikely as the colors blending on my canvas. Michael's journal lay closed on the small table beside me. I hadn't opened it in months, its revelations no longer needed as weapons, but preserved as memories of his foresight and love. He'd prepared me for a war that had somehow turned into an uneasy peace.
Mom.
Grandpa says this butterfly is a monarch. Olivia's excited voice carried across the garden. He says they fly all the way to Mexico every year. Remarkable creatures, Harold added, looking up at me with a nod that contained both acknowledgement and apology. These small moments of connection had slowly replaced the hostility between us. Later that evening, as we gathered for dinner in the main house, a Sunday tradition that had evolved over the past few months, Eleanor passed around a folder. "What's this?" I asked, accepting my copy. "The paperwork for the Rachel Winters Art Scholarship," she replied with uncharacteristic hesitation. "For students at your school who show promise but lack resources. If you approve, the Lambert Foundation will fund it annually." I flipped through the documents, searching for hidden agendas or control mechanisms. Finding none, I looked up in surprise. "This is incredibly generous." "It was Harold's idea, actually," Eleanor said, glancing at her husband. Harold cleared his throat. "Michael always spoke highly of your dedication to your students. He would have supported this." The mention of Michael still brought an ache, but increasingly, it was accompanied by warmth rather than just pain. He would indeed have loved this, a scholarship that combined his parents' resources with my passion for teaching art. "Thank you," I said simply. "The students will benefit enormously." As dinner progressed, Patricia regaled Olivia with stories of Michael as a child, his failed attempt to build a treehouse, his brief obsession with magic tricks. These stories were gifts, pieces of her father that Olivia collected eagerly. Walking home later that night, we still maintained our separate households, our separate lives, even as the boundaries between them softened. Olivia skipped ahead with her new butterfly book from Harold. "Mom," she called back, "can I go sailing with Grandpa next weekend? He says Daddy used to love sailing." "If you'd like to," I replied, watching her face light up. "And can we look at Daddy's old magic kit that Aunt Patricia found? Maybe I can learn some tricks for the school talent show." "Absolutely," I promised. As we approached our apartment building, I noticed a package leaning against our door. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before, Michael at about Olivia's age, paintbrush in hand, focused intently on a canvas. A note in Eleanor's elegant handwriting read, "Asterisk, the artistic talent comes from both sides. He would be so proud of you both." Asterisk. That night, after tucking Olivia in with her butterfly book and the photo of Michael on her nightstand, I sat at our kitchen table and opened my laptop. The draft email to the school board had been sitting there for weeks. "Dear members of the Cambridge Arts Academy Board, after careful consideration, I am writing to accept the position of Arts Department Chair." I had been hesitating, unsure if taking on additional responsibilities would compromise my time with Olivia. But the support system that had improbably formed around us these past months had changed the equation. Eleanor had offered to pick Olivia up twice a week after school for grandmother-granddaughter art appreciation, which mostly involved baking cookies and looking at Eleanor's art books. Harold had surprised everyone by volunteering as a reading helper in Olivia's class. Jade remained my steadfast friend, and Patricia had moved back to Boston permanently, eager to make up for lost time with her great-niece. I finished the email and hit send. Then I opened a new document and began typing. The Art of Family: Navigating Grief, Conflict, and Reconciliation in Blended Families. The book had been forming in my mind for months, part memoir, part guidebook for others facing similar challenges. The advance from the publisher would provide additional security for Olivia and me, but more importantly, it would help other families find their way through the maze of loss and rebuilding. 1 year to the day after our confrontation in the Lambert mansion, we gathered at the cemetery to mark the anniversary of Michael's passing. The distinct groups that had once stood on opposite sides of his coffin now stood together, united in remembrance. Olivia placed a small painted stone on Michael's headstone, a family tradition we had created. "I miss you, Daddy," she whispered. "But Mommy and Grandma and Grandpa and everyone are taking good care of me." Eleanor placed her hand on my shoulder, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "He would be pleased," she said softly. "Not with how we got here, perhaps, but with where we've arrived." I nodded, thinking of the journal entries that had led to our showdown, the leverage that had become a bridge. He always saw further ahead than the rest of us. As we walked back toward the cars, Olivia between Harold and me, holding both our hands, I reflected on the lessons of our journey. Families are complicated, messy, imperfect things. They can wound deeply, but they can also heal. Sometimes the people who hurt you most can become unlikely allies. And sometimes the best future comes not from victory or defeat, but from the courage to rewrite the rules of engagement. The sun broke through the clouds as we reached the cemetery gates, casting long shadows behind us and golden light ahead, an apt metaphor for where we had been and where we were going. The price of inheritance, I had learned, wasn't measured in money or property or even custody agreements. It was measured in the willingness to see beyond grievances, to honor the dead by finding new ways to live. "Ice cream?" Harold suggested, looking at Olivia's expectant face. "Only if Mom says it's okay," Olivia replied, showing the balanced loyalty she had developed. I smiled. Ice cream sounds perfect. And so we moved forward, these unlikely companions bound by love for a child and the memory of the man who had connected us all, not as adversaries anymore, but as family, in all its complex, challenging, wonderful forms.